lost the downtown. Where is the downtown? Savannah. Is it in here somewhere?
It was right before. There you go.
Oh, it's in here. Okay, great.
Right here.
Okay, good. Ooh. Thought we were going to lose the downtown there for a second.
We wouldn't want that to happen, right? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
All right. This has been amazing. It's always just invigorating to hear from my bid colleagues. I know we get a chance often to share our frustrations around challenges that we're facing, but it's nice to just hear you talk so passionately about your neighborhoods and your areas. So thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Don't envy being the last person up, and I know we're a little behind schedule, so I'll try to move through relatively quickly. But we've taken quite the journey from starting right in Georgetown to zipping over to DuPont, then to Noma, across the river to National Landing, back across the bridge again to Southwest, then all the way down to Tyson's. Now we're back in downtown, which in some ways is fitting because it's where it all started. It's the center of it all. And I think about downtown and just sort of the journey of what it's been and what it represents over the years. And for me, it has a deep personal meaning. I grew up here in DC. My family is all from here. And I remember in 1997 with the opening of the MCI Center, now the Capital One Arena, just what that meant for me, for my family, how excited we were to be able to come down and to feel the vibe that so many of my colleagues talked about. It's what you want out of a city, the movement of people and the sounds, the lights, the music. And man, it just made me fall in love with this city all over again. And it's that vibe and that feel that we're hoping to bring back to downtown and to really think of it, to reimagine it as a place of vibrancy and mixes of use. And that's sort of the exciting piece that we're sort of looking at right now. But I will tell you, the picture is a little different, I think, for downtown than it is for some of the other neighborhoods that we've talked about. Ours is not necessarily a story of growth and sort of new development. In some ways, it's rethinking, reimagining, reusing, and repurposing spaces that we have in our existing repertoire. And I'm happy to share a little bit with you of just some of what our story has been. Much of what has been shared is very similar. We're a BID, business improvement district, that was founded really on the principle of clean, safe, friendly. But as Rich just highlighted, really that leadership and convening role has always been really core and central to what we do at the Downtown DC BID. And I'm hoping to be able to keep that going. I'm relatively new to the job. I'm officially a little more than 60 days in on the role as president and CEO. I've been acting in the space since last year in November, and came originally to the BID in August of 2018 as our director of public space operations and to help support our homeless services work. And it's been such an interesting and wild ride to sort of come at a time when downtown was bustling and thriving and everything was positive. And then to, as my colleague shared, everything sort of changed, right? And so we are now really thinking through what is the next iteration. So with that being said, just really quick sort of overview, and I won't read all of these facts. A lot of good stuff happening in downtown. We're one of the largest business improvement districts here in the city. We're 138 blocks total with 526 buildings, lots of office space. It's at 75 million square feet up here. We are about 78% commercial office. So that has been sort of the heaviest use that we have in downtown, which has been quite a challenge, as you can imagine, given the current climate of what's going on. Relatively small number of residents, about 10,000. We'll talk about that too, because we're hoping to see change there. But we do benefit from a lot of visitors, tourists. The convention center is a part of our BID, the Capital One Arena, as I mentioned, lots of museums, lots of hotels. We get tons of tourism activity, and we want to make sure that we continue to see some thriving there. And just to give you a sense of what do we mean when we say downtown, because depending who you ask, people don't know what we're talking about often. But for us, it's roughly the area from North Capitol Street to 16th Street to the east and to the west, Constitution Avenue up to Mass Avenue, north-south, and it includes the area around the convention center. And so for us, when you think about sort of what's within that, there's a lot of metro stations, right? But it's mostly density, it's buildings, lots of office spaces, not a lot of green space, smaller pocket parks, and a few spaces that I'll talk about in just a little bit. But in a lot of ways, we're just a different fabric than some of the other neighborhoods that we've talked about thus far. In terms of present conditions, and again, I hate to be the last one, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but downtown hasn't fared well through the pandemic. When we were looking at our economic data, coming like first year through the pandemic, March 2021, the downtown core was only performing at 16% of its pre-pandemic economic activity, only 16%. A year later, April 22, we were at 47%. And then as of around today, we're still doing some of the analysis, but we're creeping it around the 60 to 65% mark. So we're really not quite where we were before. And we're trying to think through, how do we get to the next level? As you can imagine, a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing are because of that major shift in office work. We know that folks through the pandemic began working from home, and we've not yet seen folks returning to their offices. At present, we're at 52% of our office workers compared to pre-pandemic levels on average actually in their offices, which you can imagine has a major impact on our businesses that rely on that foot traffic. Other areas are a little bit more promising. Our hotels, that number is actually old. They're actually doing much better now as of pre-pandemic levels. We've seen in some ways our nightlife and our culture has almost come back entirely. We had sort of a net gain of restaurants over the course of the pandemic. So though we lost some, we actually gained quite a few more. I think folks were interested in being out and supporting businesses and restaurants. And so that was really a positive thing through the pandemic. And they're actually doing really well in terms of sales. So we're seeing higher than pre-pandemic levels in terms of sales at our restaurants. The arena is doing quite well. This says 90%. They're actually even closer to 100 now. And then our convention center is doing really well. More conventions are coming to town, and we're seeing that benefit again. And our theaters and museums are actually doing even better than when this slide was made. So in general, we're seeing some uptick there. But again, it's that daytime office worker traffic is what has been very, very slow to return. Just in terms of pandemic era innovations, and so the way we were thinking about the pandemic, much like some of my colleagues described, we had to really pivot our focus. And for us, some of the things that we wanted to focus in on, sort of coincidentally, we had been working for many years to try to make the Franklin Park renovation project happen. Franklin Park is a 5-acre park space owned by the National Park Service, smack dab in the middle of downtown. It's the largest single green space in downtown, and for many years set in a derelict state, and had really become just a difficult space to navigate for the community to enjoy. And so we had a unprecedented public-private partnership between the federal government, the local government, and the bid. We were able to usher in a $21 million renovation and open that space during the pandemic, which was quite beneficial in terms of bringing more green space at a time when people were truly valuing that space. And since then, it's been quite successful. We've had over 200 single events that have taken place in that park, and the feedback in terms of how people have experienced it has been just unprecedented. We're really excited about it. Other things that we tried to make sure that we were doing was focusing on our businesses that were truly struggling during the pandemic. So in addition to things like PPE deliveries and some of the support in terms of providing heaters and things to help people facilitate outdoor dining, supporting streetery applications, much of the things that some of my other bid colleagues shared, we also wanted to make sure that we were putting direct cash assistance in people's hands. And so we launched a pandemic assistance grant program, putting about $1.1 million into the hands of our business owners at a time when we knew that they needed it. Doubling down on events is something that I've also heard as a recurring theme, and we certainly made a point to do that with a focus on finding areas where we could close streets, close sidewalks, and rethink them. So we had what we called our downtown dine out throughout the pandemic, where we closed sidewalks on 8th Street Northwest and welcomed restaurants to come out and sort of create an experience for people, and a number of other street fairs and festivals that have taken place. We've really been trying to drive that pedestrian traffic back into downtown and folks to feel that vibe again. Some other things that have been really critical to us is just an expansion of our homeless services. We opened our Downtown Day Services Center in 2019, and through the pandemic kept that open in varying stages to make sure that we were offering support to people who needed it the most. We've actually expanded even the ability to serve people by expanding our hours. So we're now open on the weekends as well. And then there were several major planning efforts. We figured we're going through some difficult times, so we really have to be thinking about the future, even in the midst of the storm. And so two things that we embarked on. One is what we're calling our Parks Master Plan. So thinking about the success of Franklin Park and really beginning to see what are some other opportunities to totally rethink and reinvigorate green spaces throughout downtown. And so we're hoping to be able to lay out a plan whereby we have more of these sort of dynamic and vibrant public spaces for people to enjoy. And there's a real focus on the Gallery Place corridor, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. Wanted to just highlight for us 5 of our big goals for downtown as I'm sort of thinking about where we're going coming out of the pandemic. for us, we believe that it's critical to help tell that story differently in terms of how people think about downtown and how they experience it. Again, so many of you talked about just the vibe and that feeling and the energy. We believe we have to remind people why downtown is important, why you love it, why you want to be in the center of it all. We also are leading a downtown action agenda process, and actually in partnership with the Golden Triangle bid. Hey, Leona, looking forward to that work in partnership with the city. We're really going to be doubling down on what types of private investment is needed to catalyze change in downtown. What are the big investments and strategies that the city should be putting its weight behind, and what can the private sector do to help advance those outcomes? And so really excited about how that work has taken shape, and looking forward to some really major changes unfolding beginning in the early part of 2023. Again, I mentioned Gallery Place as sort of a center of our attention here in many ways. And again, it's personal for me. I love Gallery Place. It's something that has, that just entire story has always resonated with me. And frankly, it's fallen to a place of decline. And we're really focused on what can we do to turn things around along that corridor, from thinking about retail differently to making it more pedestrian focused and friendly, but really rethinking the entire experience of what you feel when you get to 7th and H. And then again, catalyzing investments in the parks and public realm, and playing more of a detailed role in homeless services. One thing that we've been looking at is to expand not just our work in having a day center where people can come for support on a daily basis, but really thinking about ways to creatively house and create opportunities for housing for people. And so we've looked at the potential of creating some single room occupancy units throughout downtown, and thinking about some transitional housing opportunities, particularly as we have folks experiencing homelessness who are sort of in a waiting period for their housing voucher. Can we get creative about getting them off the street while they're on that path to dignified housing? So lots more to come. Again, these are just some of the things that we're thinking about. I gotta just quickly mention the potential and what we see as a real hope in office to residential conversions. We currently have 3 announced projects in downtown, 2 that have broken ground already, that will bring 741 new units of housing in downtown. That's just a very small drip in the bucket. We believe we need a lot more than that. And so we're working with the city to bring more tax abatements and supports and incentives where we can see a real boom and more conversions happening, as well as just thinking about more creative ways to reduce that commercial office supply and rethink some of that existing space. Other pieces that I think are just important, and these are just really high level points in terms of where we're sort of shifting our focus to, thinking about arrangements for funding those downtown parks and green spaces. Important that we have those vibrant and dynamic spaces, but somebody's got to maintain them, and we got to think about how we're creatively funding and supporting those. One of the big promising elements of the Franklin Park work is that we have a retail space that is being constructed on the premises, and the revenue generated from that will help us to fund operations. And so just thinking creatively about how we support those and sustain those parks are important to us. Really focusing on retaining some of our existing businesses. The needs of businesses are changing. Some are going to move more to hybrid work. Some are moving more to virtual. Some are going to want more office space to accommodate, folks being able to more safely congregate in person. But we want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to really make sure people are enjoying their experience and thinking about their office spaces. So those who do want and put a premium on being in DC and being in an office, let's make sure we're giving them everything that they need and attracting new businesses to consider downtown now that the pricing models and structures will change a bit. And again, I mentioned the housing opportunities for folks experiencing homelessness. But that's all I got. So thank you all very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Jaron. That was awesome.
Thanks.